Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Digging into the Event Data Goldmine, where we're going to talk about how to leverage data to expand your event impact. I'm Jordan Clark, and today we have a great webinar planned where my colleagues and I are going to delve deep into the metrics that drive success and really discuss how these can be effectively applied to enhance your event planning and strategic execution. Now, before we start, a few housekeeping items. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can go ahead and join the chat. You can also submit questions in the Q&A and also download this slide deck and any other resources by clicking resources on the right. But before I jump into it further, let me invite Krissa and Jared, my counterparts today, to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their background here at Cvent. Krissa.
Hi, everybody. My name is Krissa Bartelt. I'm on the product and industry marketing team here at Cvent, which is kind of a fancy way of saying my job is to kind of know what's going on out there in the market, what we're thinking about, maybe some of the struggles that you're dealing with every day. So I'm always trying to be on the pulse of things and figure out, what's on your mind, but also for data and events, that's what I have to do for my job every day as a part of the marketing team. So data is something that's super important to me.
And I'm Jared Rupert. I'm on the digital analytics team here. My background's in digital marketing, analytics, A/B testing, and I partner with our event team often for event program insights. So excited to chat with you guys today about that.
And as I mentioned, I'm Jordan Clark, a senior manager of event program design here at Cvent, where I really work with clients to use data specifically to understand their use case, understand what they're trying to achieve, their goals, their objectives at a program level, at a stakeholder level, and pull that into either Cvent or help translate that process. So, welcome to today's webinar. Now, in the next half hour or so, we are going to discuss this framework we've developed at Cvent on how you can leverage the data. This discussion is going to be more than just data collection, but it's going to be more about equipping you with the tools and knowledge to transform the data into actionable insights that not only drive the success of your events, but give you tools to personally leverage the data to increase your ability to influence the outcomes within your own organization. So first, we're going to talk through how to tackle the challenge of data collection and deciphering the white noise around it to develop actionable insights. Next, we're going to discuss how to simplify the seemingly overwhelming sea of data points that you have access to, and discuss how to leverage this framework for your own organization. Lastly, we'll highlight how you can personally leverage the insights and tools that we are going to discuss today for the presence within your own organization. So, let's dive into it. Now, as my colleagues went through and introduced themselves, my hope is that you see the really diverse background that we're bringing to today's webinar. We have marketing, we have data and analytics, and we have program and process development all together to discuss how we leverage data to share stories and develop insights and influence our own roles, lines of business within Cvent, how we make an impact within our own organization. Now, one of the biggest challenges that we have with data is how to make it impactful, how to take it from being an overwhelming sea of numbers, metrics, insights into something that's a lot more actionable for the outcome that we're looking to drive towards. Now, that problem and challenge is one that I hear from clients and internally here at Cvent really commonly. The question being, how do I make the data make sense? How do I take all of this information I have and actually action on it? The transformation of data is actually a really interesting one. If you think back to years ago, especially around events, we didn't have a lot of measurable insights that we do today. We knew who registered for an event and maybe a post-event feedback survey to tell us how attendees felt the event went. But beyond the basics, we didn't have a lot to track and quantify. So that leads us to today, where We find almost the exact opposite problem, where everything is trackable, everything is measurable, every interaction, every click, every engagement in our personal lives and also at work. But what's most relevant to today's discussion is within events. Today, events can generate mountains and mountains of data, from attendee engagement to satisfaction to brand awareness. We went from a very limited data set to now this overwhelming amount of data that presents a different challenge: how to find out what's actionable versus what is white noise in the data. So first, we need to take an approach to segment the data from an undecipherable amount of numbers and metrics to a segmented data set. Take out what is that white noise that I keep referring to your function, to what your goal is, and find the data that supports things like proving an event's impact, or on how you can use data to get buy-in for different resources, or maybe even aligning it at a stakeholder level to find the right data that supports the story that you're trying to tell. As you look at the data, understand the interdependencies between the metrics that you've gathered and how to organize it for the impact that you're trying to drive towards. But that's not enough. Even segmenting the data won't be enough. We have to then organize it to be able to fully maximize the power behind the data that you're going to collect. That's what we're going to discuss today: how to leverage that data to measure the outcomes that you're driving towards with your events. Now, I will say, I just really oversimplified that on how to look at data. And we've devoted a lot of time here at Cvent to develop a framework to help you take this exact approach. And so that's what we're going to dive deeper over the next hour, because otherwise that'd be a really quick webinar. So we're going to take the next little bit and dive deeper of what we've built out for you. As we progress in the conversation, Chris is going to go ahead and share her insights and her marketing background. I'm going to jump in and share mine from a program and process development standpoint. But then you're going to see Jared do what I call his superpower, and take the data and tell a story using visualizations. So let's dive into it. But the first question that I really want to pose is, why is this so important? Why is it so critical to use data? So Chris is going to talk about that here for a moment from her perspective and from a marketing perspective of why this is so critical to use data to support the story that you're trying to tell.
Yeah, I think, we're all asking ourselves, what are we dealing with right now? What is the situation with events and marketing, right? And we did a study with Forrester this last year to figure out kind of what are top leaders in this space thinking. What are their priorities? What are their goals? And we can see here, first of all, there's a lot, right? And I think when we look at the pattern, there's a couple things. Everybody's in a growth mindset. We need to grow. We need to do more. We need to figure out how to do that. So we need to hit that gas, right? But then also immediately followed by, wait, tap the brake, be smart, move forward, but be smart about it. So immediately, I think we all are feeling this tension, right? Scale, but do it efficiently. Oh, and by the way, also like prove it's all working, right? And all of this is against the backdrop that a lot of event programs right now, they're not getting any smaller or simpler, right? We're actually seeing more events come into the fold because we're trying to kind of grab all the little ad hoc events that are floating out there at your organization to help with that scale and that centralization, right? So there's a lot to do. And if you can't get a handle on your data, how are you going to know what to do and make those decisions, right? We need that data to grow, to scale, to understand where to be smart. That's kind of what the dynamic is right now that we're dealing with. What do you think about that, Jordan?
Yeah, and from a client standpoint, this is exactly what I see. So Chris is talking about, from her experience marketing with Cvent and exactly what she's hearing, but directly from clients, I'm hearing the exact same thing, is that as they are trying to align at an organization level, they know that meeting and events have to grow. They know that they have to take the data and make them the events more relevant. They have to make sure that they have the right people at the events, that their outcomes that they're looking for are actually measurable in order to be able to continue on as a business and scale and grow that. So not only from a marketing standpoint, but also from this is what we're hearing directly from clients like yourself.
And I know Jared, I laugh because Jared and I work together on a lot of things, right? And like, this is a lot of the stuff that I know we ask his team to look at for our own event programs and our own marketing stuff. So I think, does this kind of resonate with the stuff that I bother you with on a daily basis, Jared?
Doesn't bother me at all. I think it's super relevant whether you're trying to scale the program, prove the ROI, or drive pipeline and revenue. Like, you need those data points to understand where to pour your effort into and where to cut back if it's not being effective. So definitely a relevant slide for me, I'd say.
Right. So we need data, especially because when you're looking at events what we're seeing right now too is events are becoming a little bit more under the marketing purview of, now I'm looking at all of the channels and tactics I have, and I want more visibility into events, and I want more trackability in my event program, right? And all of marketers are saying, events are important. They're big. They are the best for driving customer relationships and progressing, prospects down the funnel, right? You cannot beat that kind of event vibe. But at the same time, they cost a lot of money. They take a big piece of this budget of this pie, right? 24%. I don't know any other channel that will take that much. So we need to be able to say they're beneficial and how and why they're beneficial, because they're taking a lot of resources, right? And without data or being able to understand your data, we find ourselves doing this a lot, right? Our events are successful because they're going well. And without data or information to explain why they're going well or what's going well or how you can improve, you're really speaking to a bunch of people that aren't really going to understand your vision or your impact.
Yeah, and I think that to add to that, one of the biggest things is it's not just about registration numbers. Saying just because we had people come to our events doesn't mean that event went well. That's not the outcome that you're looking for. If the outcome that you're looking for is lead generation, then attendance is one data point, but you have to then take that into, okay, but how did we convert that? On a program level, and we referenced that in a previous slide, is that growing and scaling a program, a lot of that is about finding efficiency. Where can we use these dollars wiser in order to make sure that we're hitting the mark at a business level? And that's exactly what we're talking about here, is how do we make sure that we leverage those data and insights that we all have access to within these events and your event program, to use them to make sure that it hits the mark at an organization level.
I love that. Now that we've kind of identified, why do we care? What are we thinking about? I want to kind of bring it back to the basics, right? And let's talk about the data. And we're going to define some things right up front. Here's what you need to know, right? So a metric is one quantifiable data point. It tells you something super specific, and it's oftentimes not enough when it's on its own, right? Then we have a KPI, or a key performance indicator, and that's oftentimes a combination of metrics that really help provide insights into a business goal or something that you're trying to achieve. They help paint that bigger picture, answering not just the what, but the why and the how. So metrics give us that data, yeah, but KPIs tell us a story and they help us work towards something. So you're going to hear us talk a lot about this throughout the presentation today. And now that we've kind of aligned on what that means, right, let's talk about those metrics, those data points, right? So the goal of kind of what we're trying to teach you today is this framework, so you can understand, comprehend the metrics that you have, maybe find metrics that you didn't know that you needed, and really help you learn and identify and build KPIs so you can have better conversations and feel more comfortable with data. Because if you don't understand your data, how do you determine what's valuable, right? How do you translate data into insights that you can use to then prove impact or make decisions? So the hardest part really about understanding data or approaching data is being able to take one single metric, any metric that you have, and identify what it means, who cares about it, and when to use it. So our vision is to help you really be able to do this, right? Understand each point that you currently have or that you might add to your reporting, right? And think about each data point within this framework: what, who, and when. So that way you can see things like patterns and help activate, report, and use that data faster and smarter. Now, using kind of these three components, we're trying to break down what they might look like, because it's not just about taking the data, right? It's about making it work for you. So first we have these high level event objectives, these categorizing metrics, right? And each objective theme is aligned to aspects of an event success. So it could be engagement, it could be financial results, pipeline acceleration, any of these things, right? And by taking a metric and categorizing it in this way, you can make sure that every single piece of data has a designated purpose and it really contributes meaningfully to understanding the various facets of your event's impact, what your event's trying to do, right? So with a clear understanding of what each metric accomplishes, your decisions can become more informed and directly tied to your strategic outcomes, right? So next, we have stakeholder categories to make sure that all the insights provided are directly relevant to all the different teams that might be involved in your event within your organization, right? Or have an investment in your event success. So it could be logistics, finance, marketing, sales, leadership. So taking each data point, right, and tailoring that to meet the needs and specific objectives of each group, so you know who cares about what, while aligning on business goals, that makes a huge difference. Because although we all want the event to be successful, what sales cares about is different than what procurement and finance cares about. What leadership cares about is completely different as well, right? For example, event managers, they might look at registration and attendee conversion year over year, right? So that they can look at attainable target invitation and registration numbers and estimate per person costs more accurately, right? Marketers, on the other hand, might look at that same KPI and assess content resonance or channel effectiveness, right? So when you align metrics with the stakeholder needs, that makes sure everyone from the ground up is equipped with the right information to collaborate better, that leads to better efficiency and then results for all the teams, right?
All right, so we just went through quite a bit. We talked about why data is important. Krista just honed in on what to look at and the themes behind data, and then went into aligning it at a stakeholder level to make sure that you're telling the right story, using the right data. But let's talk about the when to use it. And what I mean by that is, depending on where you're at in your journey and depending on where your organization is at, will dictate what data you have access to and when to actually use it. Here's what I mean, and I'll be honest. I am not the biggest fan of the term maturity stages on a personal level, because it alludes to a level of maturity or immaturity. That's not it. It's a common term in order to say where are you at and where are you needing to grow to as you try to either optimize your program, as you try to go ahead and grow your program. What does this look like? So as we sat down and we broke this out, we realized that there are three really stages that you may be at. One is foundational. Now, some of this may be because you just haven't connected all of your data ecosystem together. We'll go into that in a few moments. But foundational, this is where you're just simply trying to take those building blocks and put them together in order to start painting a picture. But maybe you have gone a little bit further and you've said, okay, we have those data points, we have more insights. Now we're trying to drive towards optimizing, and we're trying to drive towards that efficiency with data. So that's where you're going to take all of these metrics, but specifically the KPIs that Carissa referenced in defining, the terms a few moments ago. But as you look at the outcomes of your event and you're saying, let me optimize it at an event level, driving towards the outcome, leveraging the metrics, leveraging the data in order to go ahead and take the event strategy that you have that's under your purview and grow it. The last one is what we refer to as advanced. You have now connected all the data. You've also connected all of your events together and that ecosystem together. And you're saying, okay, let me go ahead and optimize this to our organizational goals, our business level goals. So a lot of this not only is what data you have access to, what you're trying to drive towards, who your stakeholders are that are involved in the decision making, but also when to use the data and how to use the data. So now this is all great, but I promised you that Jared was going to come on and actually show you how we at Cvent use his team in order to take data and put a visual story around it. Like I said, it's his superpower, so I'm going to let him talk next.
Thanks, Jordan. So the first step here is understanding your data. And so understanding your data isn't just about collecting the numbers, it's about aligning data to your goals, uncovering those data relationships, uncovering patterns and opportunities, and developing a data-driven strategy. So this is the core of the Cvent data framework that we're working to create. So here are just some examples of your event metrics. So how can we use them to support our program goals? The first step will be data organization. So this will be sorting, categorizing, and filtering for metrics that support your program goals. When it comes to data organization, we want to understand what data is available, identify the primary KPI for our goal, and then leverage the supporting data needed to reach that goal. So on this next slide here, I'll use an example where our primary goal will be to grow total event registrations. So first, we'll identify the primary KPI that supports that goal. So here, that primary KPI will also be event registrations. The next step here is to dig into this KPI to understand it a little bit better. So let's get started. So to understand our event registration KPI, we want to analyze historical performance. That way we can gain perspective, set benchmarks, and create goals. So here we're looking at in-person and virtual registration data in the weeks leading up to our event. There are 3 goals in our data analysis. We want to know what happened, why did it happen, and what should we do next? So this data here is helpful, but is there any way we can make it easier to understand? Simple but effective data visualization, right? So this is that same data from before, just visualized. So data visualization can help highlight patterns and trends, making it easy to identify and communicate what's happening. So for this event, we can now see that in-person registrations peaks about 5 weeks out, and virtual registrations peaks about 1 week out. So it's interesting, but why did it happen? How do we make it actionable? So oftentimes understanding that why in this data will require you to look at supporting data for your KPI. So what is supporting data? Supporting data is any metric that helps impact your primary KPI. So again, our primary KPI here will be event registrations. You want to ask what other metrics help support the success of this goal? So when it comes to event registrations, some supporting data could be marketing metrics like email campaign performance or peak registration times or audience demographics with high conversion rates. Excuse me. Identifying supporting data can also drive collaboration across your organization by identifying which teams to work with to gain that full picture. Once you identify your supporting data, we want to understand data relationships. So ask yourself, how do these metrics impact each other? How do they impact my goal? So for example, the number of emails sent may impact the number of registrations driven from email, which could then impact total event registrations. Understanding data relationships gives us the capability to analyze each step of the registration flow and uncover optimization opportunities. So by using a data framework, you can better understand your data with data relationships, data maturity, and data categorization.
All right, Jared. Now, those were a lot of data points, and as I promised the audience, you would paint a tapestry using the data. But I will say, and I think it's an important point to make, is that not all data is necessarily going to be in one spot. Not all data is going to be centered around your event ecosystem. So, a quick question for you. Have you always been good at taking the numbers and painting this a story, or is this something that you've developed over time?
You know, I used to be a graphic designer. I came from the other side of the brain, I think, and it came from more of a requirement to prove the effectiveness of what I was trying to do. So I'd say that's something that kind of evolved by necessity over time, which I think we're also seeing in our event program, is that these data points are almost required to help you scale, grow, and get buy-in on your event strategy.
Yeah, and I think that that's the big piece here, is that this is something that evolves over time, and certainly not all data is going to be immediately understood. And I think that that's a lot of what you have to focus on, is how to maximize what you have at your fingertips and I referenced this in the beginning, take the white noise out. And that's a skill that you develop over time, but the more and more you do it, I think the more easier it becomes. Is that correct? hopefully.
Yeah, I'd say that's totally fair.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and dive into how we're going to connect the data sources together. Like I just highlighted, not all data is necessarily in one spot. Not all data is going to be in your event management system. In fact, this is something that we find at Cvent ourselves. The data to measure an event program can be found in various spots. This could be your CRM, your marketing automation tool, BI tool, business intelligence tool, or more, depending on what the outcome is that you're trying to drive towards, is where you're going to look at for that data. And we called this digging for data and finding it within your data goldmine. You have access across your organization to a lot more insights than maybe you even realize, but it's all about connecting it together and building that ecosystem together so that you can fully understand your event program, the impact that it has, but also share your data points with cross-functionally across the organization. So I know that, Carissa, this is something that marketing works really hard on, is how to share their insights to influence other parts of even Cvent's organization. What do you see?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so much information out there. Sometimes it's just about knowing where to look, right? Because I don't have the information I need in my day-to-day to kind of prove longer term pipeline conversion, right? How long did that take? I want to see where we are in the sales cycle. A lot of that is sales owned data. So how do we kind of share that to make sure that we're getting the full picture of everything that we're doing? It takes a lot of work, right? But you can't make good choices without it.
Yeah. And I will say, I think that, Jared, you come across this a lot as you look at, in fact, the comment I keep making is that not all data is going to be in one spot. That's actually something that I heavily learned from Jared as I looked at a dashboard internally that he had developed, and I asked, okay, where did all of this come from? And he mentioned the multiple sources that he looked at to gather those insights. So Jared, I mean, is this also, I'm sure, what you see, but any tips here on how to take all those siloed data sets and bring them together?
Yeah, you need to decide on a single source of truth here. So like, there's so much good data in these pockets out there, but getting them all into one space, one central hub, is so powerful because you get to layer on these different data sources and put a different lens on different data sets, and it really opens up a whole world of insights once you put all that data in one space. So super powerful stuff that opens up the doors to a lot more insights for your event program.
Yeah. And I think that, and I'm going to turn it back over to Carissa. She's talked about what we look at from a KPI level and the outcome, the stakeholder information, and aligning the data to the stakeholders, when to look at it based on where you're at in your maturity. I think that this discussion leads to the where. Carissa.
Yeah, definitely. Because we talked about when you take a single metric or a single line item or data set point, right? You need to know the what, the who, and the when. But now kind of adding that together, it's also the where. So where is that source data? Where is that key piece of information to help kind of tell that full picture? Because you don't always have it. And sometimes, hey, I want to understand this, but I don't know where that piece of information comes from. And it's just opening it up for more conversations and doing that digging to figure out, okay, how can I pull that source data in? Where is that piece of information? Because when you have more data, right, sometimes it's overwhelming, but you get that deeper picture of what's going on, right? This is where that digging through the data comes from. So these different layers, they could represent maybe different attendee interactions at different stages of their journey, or they could represent maybe different channels within your marketing promotional strategy. But when they are connected together like that, the systems that you use to track and capture all those data points, you can really get a full picture of what's happening. So the deeper that you dig, the more that you can find. And it's great, right? I know we want to connect multiple systems. It's amazing, but it's equally important to centralize things like your event technology onto kind of one platform, right? Especially if you're managing different event types. big, small, virtual, across all these different platforms, you end up with really fragmented data. And then you have to work on multiple integration points and workflows. And this makes it really, really hard and almost overwhelming to compare the data that you have accurately to really understand the true impact of the whole channel, right? I can't compare apples to apples if they're not coming from the same place and I'm not looking at data the same way. So definitely think about how you can connect, right? But also centralize so you can have more consistency, so you can be more efficient, you can have more clarity in what you're doing. I think that's massive. And Jared, I know you have to pull information from all of these different places. What benefits do you see in this kind of consolidation of technology? That's kind of on everybody's mind right now as a big trend going forward.
Yeah, I would say the data depth that you get, right? It really provides a lot of depth. Let's say you talk about event registrations. Like you get a lot more depth when you connect systems. You can figure out how are they turning into leads in our CRM system, or how are they engaging with our marketing automation drip campaigns? So the more that you plug in, the more data depth you have and the more context you have to really uncover and find out what's going on. So I guess to tee myself up there, connecting systems does give your data more depth, right? So we're going to return back to our original goal from the previous example where we're trying to drive event registrations. So once again, we're looking at in-person registrations by week leading up to the event. So again, what happened? In-person registrations peaked 5 weeks before our event, but is there any way we can understand why that happened? Well, let's try layering in some supporting data from other systems. I'm going to try marketing channel data. Much better here. So now we're looking at in-person registrations by week, by marketing channel. So by adding supporting data sources, you can really gain additional perspective towards your goal. It helps us uncover that why in our analysis. So now we can see which marketing channels drove the most registrations. You can see in week 5 in the green, our email channel drove a lot of registrations, and in purple, social media drove registrations. So we're still left with now what, which might require a little bit more digging. So eventually we want to take some action here. Because taking action on your analysis can help you evolve into a consultative and data-driven event strategist.
All right. So Jared, question before you continue.
Sure.
What's your biggest piece of advice to this audience on how to storytell with data, but not make it overwhelming at the same time?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing is understand your audience pain points, understand what their goals are, understand like their day-to-day pain points and where they're trying to get why they're trying to get this data. Understand that why from what their pain points are. So you need that context to tell a relevant story to them that really drives change, because otherwise you might just be throwing a lot of random data at them that doesn't really resonate with their story or their pain points. So I'd say make sure you're talking to them, make sure you're asking them why they want this data, what they're looking to accomplish, because then you guys can really collaborate on a solution together.
And that goes to that very first point that we made of why data is so important, but understanding the why behind each stakeholder as well. I like it.
So again, by layering in data, we're going to uncover more opportunities to dive deeper into your analysis. For better or worse, more data will lead to more questions, but the answers are worth it. So here, we now know that email and social media were our most effective channels for our event. We're going to want to dig further into those systems for more context. So for email, we might want to know, well, which types of email drove the highest click rates, or which subject lines drove the best open rates, or which audiences were most receptive for our email campaign. And social media, right? Which social networks are most effective at driving registrations, or which content types, which posts drove most registrations. So again, more context and more opportunities to analyze as we layer in more data. So by digging into supporting data, we can uncover successful strategies for our program. Once we have that context, we'll know the recipe for success here, right? We'll know which channels, which timing, and which messaging have been successful. So we can become strategic and consultative in developing our go-forward plan to drive event registrations. This type of analysis can really lead you to make strategic decisions that drive impact in your organization.
All right. So we talked a lot, but at the same time, I would be remiss if I didn't pause just for a moment and humanize this a little bit on how you can personally leverage data in order to influence your own influence and grow your sphere of influence within your own organization. So maybe you're an event planner starting out in the industry and you're trying to figure out, okay, what's that next step that I can take? Or maybe you are the head of global events within your organization and you're wondering, okay, how do I get a better seat at the table or more influence within the organization? That's one of the biggest things that I've seen with clients, and we've heard it multiple times through these client use stories that we've heard of, hey, I've been able to leverage these data and insights in order to grow my own impact. So I want, as I go through the next couple of slides, for you to start thinking, okay, what data do you have access to, but how can you leverage your own data and insights within your organization in order to grow your sphere of influence? Like I said, if you're an event planner, maybe you're looking at that next step in your career, or if you're supporting multiple events and maybe run a team of events, then maybe it's you're looking to grow into that next step. So that sphere that we're talking about, a lot of it has to do with how you look at data. So if you are that event planner starting out and you're looking at how to maximize your event, how to make sure that your influence within your own sphere of control and data within your organization makes the most sense, then you're going to be able to look at those metrics at an event level and say, okay, how do I optimize this? As you grow in your own career and take that next step, you're going to want to work with cross-functionally with departments like marketing, like data and analytics, in order to say, okay, how can I draw those interdependencies together? How can I share my own insights, share the optimization that I have found within my line of business, within my purview? But the more that you do that, the more that your sphere of influence within your own organization will naturally grow and ultimately lend you that seat at the table where you now become in that entire ecosystem that we talked about a moment ago, and that source of truth of data, where now your source of truth is one that other departments, other teams are looking at to garner insights from. So again, the more that you can use data to grow your sphere of influence, the more that your career influence can also grow.
Yeah, I love how you put that. And I like to see it kind of like this, right? We're using this example of driving registrations, and that's one person looking at a single part of a single event, right? Maybe this conference. I need to understand the tactics that are going into that, and then I need to understand the performance of that. And as I grow in my career or my kind of sphere of influence, right, now I want to look at the event program or the event channel, all of the different events that make up, the things that my organization is hosting. I need to understand which ones are working and which ones aren't. And as I even grow further without that, right, now I want to see how the event program and all my events are working compared to all the other channels and how they're making impact for the entire marketing org, right? And this is how, when you're looking at data, understanding the different points at each step of this journey will really help you grow in your career, right? And have those right conversations. And I think that that's super key. So now let's bring this back. Yes, we want to make events successful. Yes, we want all of this to go on, but how does this help me not only grow my career, right, in my trajectory for event execution, but how does this help me work better with all the people around me and really activate that to build cross-functional influence, right? So I'm going to focus on sales and help you understand the different types of data and data points that you might want to report out to for different stakeholders to make a difference in how you collaborate and work with other teams and grow kind of that internal knowledge, right? So for example, these are marketing and execution data points, right? And sales does care about my registration numbers. They obviously want to see increased registration for events, right? However, if I start talking to them about how that email didn't work great, or our social media can improve, what I'm probably going to get back, and I say this speaking with all the love and support for all my sales counterparts, right, is a lot of, well, what if we did this on social media? Or I wasn't sure that I like the way that we wrote that email. I would pitch it maybe a little bit more like this. And these are the type of conversations that we have often, right, which then leads to swim lanes being crossed and a lack of focus on the right things. So the issue is that for both teams, we have different data, even though we might be working towards the same KPI, right? And if I'm discussing, if I come to the table with these data points that are marketing and execution focused, sales is obviously going to have opinions and want to contribute, but do they really need to know which email subject line work best or which social media content work best? They might find it interesting, but it doesn't necessarily help me drive their actions or help them to understand what their role is within the event, right? So most teams need all people involved to really be aligned with their expectations to support successfully, right? So these are what I would say are better KPIs than for sales, right? I want to be able to say, these are how many net new contacts we received from an event, promotion, right? These are how many opportunities we advanced. These are how many MQLs we generated. Here are the people on the team, right? That help make that happen. Here are the customers during registration that expressed interest in scheduling an appointment. These are sales-driven invites that converted. So people on your team that did that, along with specific sales teams or members who are really successful. And I would report on how many people registered through different audience segments, right? These data points are crucial to sales, and they really set the context of what they need to focus on. Jordan, I know like we all kind of deal with this every day, right? Working with different teams, giving them the right information, not too much information.
Well, and I have to laugh a little bit because I will say that while Chris is being nice, that is also me that sometimes accidentally crosses over into swim lanes. And I will say, even building this webinar, you have 3 very different backgrounds coming together and putting together this webinar and putting together this content. And as we were all discussing the different stakeholders and different perspectives, that was one of the things that we really had to look at was how do we take all of our expertise, all of what matters to each one of us, and bring it together, which it was a really interesting exercise because in essence, we represent 3 different stakeholders across our own organization. And so as we delve into it, and especially in this great example of sales versus marketing, yes, I will be the first to say our sales team is hyper involved and wants to make sure that everything goes right for our customers. Everything is perfection. But that's not their area of expertise, just like I wouldn't turn to our marketing team and expect them to turn into salespeople and, or my sales team to be an expert in data and analytics. That's why we have these cross-functional teams. But it is really important, as Chris has said, to draw the expectations of each of our roles in all of this and also support the collaboration cross-functionally so that we can bring that powerhouse of data together.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's being able to say, okay, here's a data point. Who needs to know that? And then who cares about it and balance those off appropriately. Because then you really maximize like the time and the conversations that you are having with other people, especially outside of your department, and get them to, it's about building respect. It's about building trust, right? Working towards a common goal. And then it's just better alignment when you're able to kind of cut through the clutter. So I think really understanding the who cares, who needs to know, and being able to be empowered in those conversations is going to make your life so much easier.
Yeah, Chris, when you talk about who cares, I think it's really important to listen to your stakeholders and again, understand their pain points and their goals, right? So you have that context. I think the data required for your conversation can really depend and change based off the context of that discussion. So let's say, for example, our sales team is focused on one event and they're trying to understand how to configure their lead routing for the leads from this one event. So they might need to know which regions the attendees are located, and then that way they can better align their team structure and their task management from this one event. Alternatively, if we're looking at our event types, the sales team might want to know which event types are most effective at turning attendees into leads. This could be very relevant in the discussion with sales regarding your wider event program. So by understanding your program effectiveness for this metric, you can recommend a strategic approach to help sales reach their goals. And lastly, you really want to ensure that your event program data is represented in your wider marketing analytics. So at the end of the day, your event program is a marketing lead machine. So sales is going to want to know what is driving leads into their sales funnel. By ensuring that your data is plugged into the marketing system, you can answer questions like, how does your event program contribute to total marketing leads? How does this compare to other marketing channel tactics like partnerships or website or chat? So making sure that you're plugged in and have the context for these discussions is critical in making sure that we're maximizing the effectiveness of the discussion.
and we've talked about a lot of stuff today. So how many people, feel like they're data experts now? It's a lot, but I think what we're trying to do is at least teach you how to approach your data, how to understand your metrics. So maybe starting this journey is a little bit less overwhelming than approaching data, generally. So that's really the goal with what the framework is that we're kind of trying to outline here, and I hope you've seen this pattern, right? To help guide you in learning how to process and comprehend data, right? To help you identify what that data means, who cares about it, when it can be utilized, and then where it can be found. If you can look at any metric and understand these things, that is going to be a great start in getting you kind of to that data analyst vision, but most importantly, how do you activate it? When you know all of those things, what do I do with it? How do I make impact? And Jared had some great examples of that today. We want you to be able to understand how you can leverage different components to identify practical and significant KPIs, right? Integrating data from various sources to get a better view that really ensures your event story is organized and insightful, that lets you make better decisions, right? That helps drive you forward. And then also how you can establish a solid foundation for growth and impact for your events, growing your program, growing your organization, and then growing you yourself, right, in your career. And I think that's kind of what our vision was today, right? Give you a way to feel comfortable in approaching that data. And now that's the end of kind of our structured presentation today. So we're going to switch gears a little bit here and switch to Q&A. And before we do that, if anybody wants to earn a $100 Amazon gift card, which I know I do, please sign up to complete a demo with us. We can show you all about our reporting and our data that Cvent helps you get. We'll have a link over there in the chat. To anybody outside the US, the gift card can be converted from $100 US to any currency available of your choosing. And now we're going to take some Q&A, which is probably my favorite part of all of these webinars. So let's see. What are some examples of KPIs? I'm going to toss that over to Jordan.
All right. So when we look at KPIs, we've actually mentioned a couple of them. Lead conversion. Are you trying to garner more leads? Are you trying to increase registration? Are you trying to increase brand awareness? This goes to our entire outcome that we talk about of what is the outcome that you're trying to drive towards with your event. So those are a couple high-level ones. And stay tuned for this, are looking at developing a more robust kind of library for you to be able to look at and understand how or some of the KPIs that we commonly see as you drive towards the outcome that you are looking for. So those are some high level ones, but I think it's more about you saying, okay, why are we doing this event? What is the purpose of doing this event? That turns into the KPI that you're driving towards.
All right, I got another one from Dr. Chris Hudson that will answer. Can you talk more about data sources when the volunteer professional organization does not have some of these platforms? Can you find some of this stuff manually? Jared, what do you think about that?
Yeah, of course, there's very robust enterprise systems that are very complex, but there's also some simpler tools that can get you by, right? Like if you just have some base level web analytics, for example, on your registration site, that'll give you channel data. And from there, you can kind of understand which channels are working better for registrations, et cetera. So it doesn't need to be a very robust system necessarily. I'd say start slow and use something very simplified and just kind of see what you can get into your systems to start. And over time, you'll kind of expand as you kind of see the values of this data.
That's a great answer. Now we've got one from George. What is a good first step to developing a data map for our events? Kind of similar to the one that we saw on the screen. I think my first step, I would always say, is figure out what data you have. A lot of times it's you have a lot of information that you don't know that you have. So first step is figuring out what data do you have, and then you can start plotting those out on the map. If you don't know what you're working with, it's really hard to create kind of that strategy.
Yeah, the one thing I would say to add to that is to look at all the different systems that your organization uses, because there's data in every single system. Also understand your own processes internally. The more you understand your processes, the more you can say, okay, here's where our data exists, whether it's how is sales collecting information about customers and retaining that information. How is it that marketing is sending out their emails, and how are they tracking responses? The more that you can understand all the different systems that are used, the more you can start looking at those interdependencies that we talked about.
Anything you want to add, Jared? Where to get started to develop kind of a data map?
I would say it's from those discussions and working backwards, right? So finding out the KPI, and then remember we talked about connected data sources, supporting data, kind of like working backwards to figure out what impacts that top goal, and moving backwards to figure out, do I have that data? If not, how can I find it?
I like that. I'm looking at other questions. Here is another one. When it comes to survey data, what do you find has worked best to help get people to take the time to actually participate? We struggle to get people to give us their feedback about the event, even from the consumer point of view. Incentivizing surveys is always nice. Persistence is something that works well for us. I think, we just did Cvent Connect a couple months ago, and I think we sent several emails to remind people to take the surveys. And then just being really purposeful in what your survey looks like. Ask things that you really need to know and get meaningful information. Because if I open a survey and you're asking me 20 questions, I'm automatically overwhelmed and not really feeling it. So keep them short, keep them concise, and keep them really aligned with whatever your goal is, right? What are you trying to find out? That will help people. It's a lower barrier to entry. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing I found is set expectations with your survey. And what I mean by that is, and again, Chris mentioned Cvent Connect, we on stage literally say every single time, hey, it's a short survey. Please take it. Give us this feedback. We want to make sure that this is relevant to you, because that's our customer conference. And so we're saying, hey, we want to hear from you, and here's your time so that we can make sure that this is the most relevant for you, especially in the next event that you go to. So make sure to set those expectations, how long it's going to take. And to Chris's point, make sure that every question that you ask is one that you're actually going to leverage and action on. Don't just ask questions to ask questions. And then make sure that it's built into your structure and your content on a very regular basis so that customers know that, hey, or attendees know that, hey, every single session, every single piece, it will be broadcasted everywhere, because if that's something that you're trying to drive towards as a potential KPI is increased customer feedback.
I like that. Well, and showing someone what you do with it. I mean, even if people attend your event and they didn't take the survey this time, if you can prove and show and demonstrate how you acted on something that you received through survey feedback, the past one, they're more likely then to be like, oh, they really do listen and they really do hear, and my feedback does matter, right? So I think that's huge, right? Do something with it and be purposeful, and then don't be afraid to tell them this was based on your feedback, or this is based on people that gave this kind of response, right? I think proving that you are going to do something with the data that you get in a survey really makes a difference.
Yeah, to your point, that's one of our top attended sessions at Connect, is how we use this data, and customers love it every single time when we say, we collected this amount of information from the feedback, and you'll hear it in our product roadmaps. You'll hear it built in and intertwined as we tell customers that this was a direct reflection of what you told us.
All right, I'm looking through some other ones. Andrea, was there going to be a recording? Yes, there'll be a recording, Andrea. Let's look. What platforms do we use to gather data? I'm going to turn that over to Jared.
Yeah, so we use a pretty robust enterprise analytics software for all things web and digital, and that we pull in marketing channel data. We pull in, and some examples of these could be things like Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics. Things like that are kind of in the sphere of this space. And those are really powerful in ways that they can help plug in different data sources into one single source of truth. So we pull in our marketing channel data, our event program data, et cetera. So I'd say any robust single source of truth that can handle integrations would do you well.
I love that. I think maybe we have time for one or two more. I'm just going to take a peek. I know we're coming up, so if you guys have to jump, that's totally fine. Here's one, and I'm going to lob it over to Jordan. We have a mature SMM program in our business. So the reporting I do is based on aggregate meetings by type or division. Do you have examples of reporting in aggregate versus looking at reporting on individual events? Actually, I think both of you guys could answer that really well.
Yeah, so Andrea, I love this question. And just to kind of level set with everybody who may or may not be in the same spot that Andrea is in, as you look at a meeting and events program and you begin to optimize it, that's where you're going to have a strategic meetings management program. And that's where exactly what Andrea is referring to, where you focus on the process efficiencies to say, okay, what's our governance? What's our intake process? How are we consistently sourcing? Along with what are the objectives for each event type and developing that into your entire MarTech stack. But when we look at reporting in particular, and I mentioned this in your sphere of influence, and we've mentioned this in a couple of different ways, as we look at event by event by event, you're going to have different outcomes. You're not going to have that consistency. When we look at event types and we say, okay, and we categorize them by, is this a customer event? Is this a webinar? Is this a buyer's event? What's the different event types that you're putting on? That's where you're able to garner that ongoing, not only efficiency, but consistency with your outcomes and your data. But we also highlighted that, hey, not all of this is in one spot. So while Cvent specifically, or your event platform, facilitates that event execution. And yes, we do incorporate into a meeting and events program, and that's what my team specializes in and focuses on. That oftentimes, if you're looking at something that is cross-functional, you're going to likely look at reporting using external tools as well. And that's where Jared's team really looks at Cvent's own meetings management program, meeting and events program across our customer events, across our webinars, and says, okay, what analytics do we have access to? So Jared, I'm going to let you talk about the reporting side.
Yeah, definitely. So similar to how earlier we were talking about reporting on your event program, right? You might be looking at this by event type, if that's where discussion is going. Hey, what type of events should we run? Or maybe the discussion is what channels are fueling the whole program, or maybe it's a different cut where you're just putting them all together and you're saying, here are the marketing channels, or here are the audiences that resonate here. So again, it really depends, and that's why I think having all that data plugged in and being able to switch lenses on your data depending on the context of that discussion is very powerful. So I would say, definitely we do have examples, but I would say that's kind of how we do it here at Cvent, I would say.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. There were so many great questions that we got today. I love spending time with Jordan and Jared, who are some of my favorite coworkers, right? Especially on our data journey. Connect with all of us. If you have more questions, we're out there. I think they dropped our LinkedIns in the chat, so feel free to reach out. We can talk data, we can talk events, we can talk marketing. Definitely always willing to chat. Shameless plug now, there's a survey on the side. No, we talked about that earlier. Go take our survey.
And it will only take a couple of minutes, and it's very, very short. And we do read every single response, setting all those expectations.
See? Well done, Jordan. So thanks for joining us today. Hope that you have a fabulous rest of your day. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.